The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called at dawn, Terran Standard Time. Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her translator earpiece as she entered the massive crystalline chamber that housed representatives from 47 different species. The air hummed with tension and the nervous chittering of the insectoid Vex delegation. "The situation on Zarathi Prime has deteriorated beyond our worst projections," announced High Counselor Vex Tar, his mandibles clicking anxiously. "The plague has now infected 93% of the population. Conservative estimates suggest complete species extinction within 47 standard days." Sarah listened as the holographic display showed the dying world of Zarathi Prime, once a thriving planet of 12 billion crystalline beings. It now appeared as a darkened sphere, with only scattered pockets of light remaining. The Zarathi had been one of the Council's founding members, their mathematical genius contributing to faster-than-light travel and quantum communication networks that connected the galaxy. "What about the medical assistance programs?" asked Ambassador Theron from the Aquatic Cetacean Union, his voice bubbling through the water-filled speaking apparatus. High Counselor Vex Tar's compound eyes dimmed. "The Altarian Medical Consortium has declared the situation hopeless. Their best physicians withdrew last week after losing 3 research teams to the plague. The Synthesis Collective refuses to risk their bioships in Zarathi space. Even the Eternal Watch has deemed intervention too costly for the potential outcome." Murmurs of resignation rippled through the chamber. The Altarians were considered the finest medical minds in the galaxy, their crystalline neural networks capable of processing medical data at quantum speeds. If they had given up, most species considered the matter closed. Sarah stood slowly, her movement causing a brief hush in the vast chamber. As the representative of one of the galaxy's newer species, humans rarely spoke during major crisis discussions. Most council members still viewed Earth as a backwater planet that had stumbled into space travel rather than earned it. "Honored counselors," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. "Humanity formally requests permission to mount a relief mission to Zarathi Prime." The chamber erupted. Diplomatic protocol dissolved as representatives from dozens of species began speaking simultaneously. The Synthesis Collective's representative, a shimmering energy being contained within a force field, pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as indignation. The human species lacks the medical knowledge, technology, or resources for such an undertaking. The energy being transmitted through harmonic frequencies. This is not a matter for primitive biological entities. Sarah remained standing, waiting for order to be restored. High Counselor Vex Tar eventually managed to quiet the assembly with a series of sharp clicks that translated as calls for silence. "Ambassador Chen," the High Counselor said, "while we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm, the Zarathi plague operates on quantum biological principles that human science has yet to comprehend. The infected crystalline matrix deteriorates at the molecular level, while simultaneously corrupting data pathways within their neural networks. It is essentially 2 plagues in one, biological and technological." "We understand the challenges, honored counselor," Sarah replied calmly. "However, humanity has experience with seemingly impossible medical situations. We've survived plagues, pandemics, and biological warfare throughout our history. Sometimes fresh perspective and unconventional approaches succeed where traditional methods fail." Ambassador Cleth of the Iron Coalition, a massive robotic entity whose voice resonated like grinding metal, interjected with barely concealed contempt. "Human medicine relies on crude chemical interventions and primitive surgical techniques. You lack the quantum medical technology necessary to interface with crystalline biology." "Perhaps," Sarah acknowledged. "But we have something else. We have doctors and scientists who won't give up, even when the situation seems hopeless. We have people who believe that every life is worth fighting for, regardless of the odds." The Altarian representative, a tall being with skin like polished chrome and eyes that shifted through the color spectrum, stood with fluid grace. "I must protest this proposal in the strongest terms. The human species would be sending their people to certain death. The plague is unlike anything we have encountered. It appears to be artificially engineered, designed specifically to target the Zarathi's unique biology. Our analysis suggests it may have technological components that adapt to different treatment approaches, which makes it even more important that we try, Sarah responded. The Zarathi helped design the quantum networks that allow us to communicate across the galaxy. They shared their mathematical discoveries freely with all Council species. When Earth was threatened by the Void Seekers, Zarathi ships joined the defense fleet, despite having no military obligations to us. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The Void Seeker invasion 3 years earlier had nearly resulted in Earth's destruction, while most Council species had provided token support. The Zarathi had sent their entire defensive fleet, including their precious research vessels. 2 Zarathi science ships had been destroyed, protecting human colonies. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's chief medical officer for interstellar affairs, stepped forward from the human delegation. "If I may address the Council," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. "Human medical teams are already prepared to depart for Zarathi space. We've studied all available data on the plague and believe we can at least slow its progression, if not find a cure." "Impossible," stated the Altarian representative flatly. "Our quantum medical computers have run trillions of simulations. There is no viable treatment pathway." Dr. Vasquez smiled grimly. "Your computers are amazing. But they think like computers. Humans think differently. We see patterns that machines miss. We take risks that logical analysis would never recommend. Sometimes the impossible solution is the only one that works." High Counselor Vextar's mandibles clicked in what Sarah recognized as deep thought. "Even if we were to authorize such a mission, the human species lacks the medical technology necessary to treat quantum biological entities. Your equipment cannot interface with crystalline neural networks." "We've thought of that," Dr. Vasquez replied. "We're requesting permission to work with any Council species willing to provide technical support. We don't need to understand the technology completely. We just need access to it." The chamber fell silent again. Council members exchanged glances, whispered conversations, and data transmissions. Finally, Ambassador Theron of the Cetacean Union spoke up. "The Cetacean medical ships could provide quantum biological interface equipment," he announced, causing surprised murmurs throughout the chamber. "We have no expectation of success, but the Zarathi deserve someone willing to try." One by one, other species began offering support. The Peaceful Gardener Collective offered their biosynthesis facilities. The Merchant Guild promised to waive all transportation fees. Even some members of the typically isolationist Iron Coalition grudgingly offered spare computer processing power. High Counselor Vextar looked around the chamber with what Sarah had learned to interpret as amazement. "It appears that humanity has accomplished something remarkable," he said slowly. "You have convinced half the Council to support a mission that our best analysts consider suicide." "Not suicide," Sarah corrected gently. "Hope. Sometimes that's all you need to start with." The vote was closer than Sarah had expected. 24 species voted in favor of the mission, 20 voted against, and 3 abstained. By the narrowest possible margin, humanity had been granted permission to attempt the impossible. As the Council session ended, Sarah found herself surrounded by representatives from dozens of species. Some offered additional support, others warnings about the dangers ahead. Ambassador Cleth of the Iron Coalition approached last, his massive metallic form casting a long shadow. "You realize," his mechanical voice rumbled, "that when this mission fails, it will be seen as proof that humanity is not ready for major galactic responsibilities." Sarah met his optical sensors steadily. "And when we succeed, it will prove that sometimes being ready isn't as important as being willing." Dr. Vasquez joined Sarah as they left the chamber. "Think we can actually pull this off?" she asked quietly. Sarah looked up at the massive viewing port that showed the star-filled expanse of space. Somewhere out there, an entire species was dying while the galaxy's greatest medical minds had given up hope. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "But we're about to find out what humans can accomplish when everyone else says it's impossible." Within 6 hours, the first human medical ships were preparing for departure. The mission that every expert called hopeless was about to begin. Led by a species that specialized in proving experts wrong, the human medical fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Zarathi system 3 days after leaving Earth. Dr. Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, the UES Nightingale, watching as the scanners painted a grim picture of the dying solar system. "Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Commander Park, the ship's navigation officer. "I've never seen anything like this." Where Zarathi Prime should have been bustling with quantum communication arrays and crystal cities visible even from space, only faint energy signatures remained. The planet's once brilliant rings of harvested quantum crystals now drifted dark and lifeless. Several of the system's mining stations appeared to be completely dead. Dr. Webb, called Chief Medical Officer Rodriguez from her station, were receiving a transmission from Zarathi Prime. It's barely coherent. The main screen flickered to life, showing the fragmented image of a Zarathi. The crystalline being's normally prismatic surface was clouded and cracked. Its internal light dimmed to barely a flicker. Static corrupted the transmission, making the translated words difficult to understand. "Human ships. Not possible," told Council. "No cure. Why you come to die with us?" Dr. Webb stepped forward, his weathered face showing the determination that had driven him through 40 years of emergency medicine. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb, of the Earth Medical Corps. We're here to help. Can you direct us to your primary medical facilities?" "Help?" The being's light pulsed weakly. "Our healers gone. Crystal matrix failing. Quantum coherence breaking down. You cannot understand our biology." "We don't need to understand it completely, Doctor," Webb replied calmly. "We just need to help. We've brought medicine, equipment, and doctors who specialize in impossible cases. Where can we set up our medical stations?" The transmission cut out entirely. For long moments, the bridge remained silent, except for the hum of ship systems. Then, the communications array crackled back to life with a stronger signal. "Human medical fleet. This is Crystalline Singer Veth Ara of the Zarathi Medical Collective." The voice was clearer, though still weak. "I am, perhaps the last functioning healer on Zarathi Prime. Your request to help is incomprehensible to us. Our biology operates on principles your species has never encountered." Dr. Webb exchanged glances with Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's specialist in xenobiology. She nodded encouragingly. "Crystalline Singer Vethara, we understand our limitations, but we've brought something else: human stubbornness. We don't give up easily. We're requesting permission to establish medical camps in whatever areas you consider safest." A long pause followed. When the response came, it carried what the translation software labeled as harmonics, indicating desperate hope. "There is a research facility in the Northern Crystal Gardens. It was, our primary medical center. Most areas are now contaminated. But the central complex still has basic life support for your biology. We will attempt to guide you." The landing was unlike anything Dr. Webb had experienced in 30 years of disaster medicine. As the shuttles descended through Zarathi Prime's atmosphere, the devastation became apparent. Crystal cities that should have gleamed like jewels in the planet's binary sunlight were dark and fractured. Vast geometric gardens of quantum crystals had turned black and brittle. "My God," whispered Dr. Kim, as they touched down near the medical facility. "It's like the entire planet is dying from the inside out." The Zarathi Medical Center was a wonder of crystalline architecture, or had been. Towering spires of living crystal that should have pulsed with internal light were now dark and cracking. Only a few structures still showed any signs of life. Crystalline Singer Vethara met them at the facility's entrance. The Zarathi healer was clearly in the advanced stages of the plague, her normally brilliant prismatic form clouded and dim. Her movements were slow and careful, as if each step required enormous effort. "I do not understand why you have come," she said, her voice carrying harmonic undertones of confusion. "Your species cannot survive exposure to our quantum biological fields. Our medicine operates through crystal matrix resonance that your brains cannot process. This plague corrupts both biological and technological systems simultaneously." Your primitive medical knowledge cannot address such complexity. Doctor, Webb set down his equipment case and looked directly at the dying alien. You're right about almost everything. We don't understand your biology. We can't survive exposure to your quantum fields. Our medical knowledge is primitive compared to yours. Then why? Vethara's light pulsed weakly. Because sometimes being right isn't enough, Dr. Webb continued. Sometimes, you need to be willing to try anyway. Show us your patience. The journey through the medical facility was heartbreaking. Corridor after corridor contained Zarathi in various stages of the plague's progression. The early stages showed as minor clouding in their crystal matrix. Advanced cases were barely recognizable as living beings, their crystalline forms cracked and dark. Their quantum consciousness fragmented into static-filled whispers. The plague attacks on multiple levels, Vethara explained as they walked through a ward filled with suffering beings. First, it corrupts the biological crystal growth patterns. Then, it interferes with our quantum neural networks. Finally, it destroys our ability to maintain coherent consciousness. Most of our healers died, trying to directly interface with infected patients. Dr. Kim was taking readings with her portable scanners, frowning at the results. The quantum interference is incredible. Our equipment can barely function here. How are we supposed to analyze something we can't even properly detect? We start with what we can see, Dr. Webb replied, kneeling beside a young Zarathi whose light was barely visible. Vethara, can you translate for us? I want to ask this patient about symptoms. What followed was one of the strangest medical consultations in human history. Through Vethara's translation, Dr. Webb began interviewing plague victims using the same basic diagnostic questions he'd asked human patients for 4 decades. When did the symptoms start? Where did you first notice the problem? Has the progression been steady or intermittent? This is pointless, Dr. Kim muttered, after they'd spoken with dozen patients. We're trying to apply human medical principles to quantum crystalline biology. It's like trying to perform surgery with stone tools. Sometimes stone tools work, Dr. Webb replied quietly. And sometimes they're all you have. As the hours passed, a pattern began to emerge. Despite the exotic nature of Zarathi biology, the plague followed patterns that Dr. Webb recognized from human diseases. It started in the extremities and worked inward. It progressed faster in younger individuals. It seemed to respond to stress levels. It's acting like a cascade failure, he told the assembled medical team during their first night on Zarathi Prime. Something triggers the initial infection, then it spreads through interconnected systems. The quantum aspects are beyond us, but the basic progression follows principles we understand. Dr. Rodriguez looked skeptical. So, what are you suggesting? That we treat crystalline quantum beings with human medicine? I'm suggesting we treat the underlying patterns, Dr. Webb replied. The Altarians tried to address the quantum aspects directly. What if we focus on breaking the cascade at the biological level? Dr. Kim pulled up her xenobiology notes on the portable computer. It could work, theoretically. If we can slow the biological progression, it might give their quantum healing systems time to compensate. The risk is enormous, Vethara warned, her translated voice carrying harmonics of fear. If your treatment interferes with our quantum matrices, it could accelerate the dying process. You could kill patients who might otherwise survive several more days. Dr. Webb looked around at the ward full of dying Zarathi. How many more days do they have if we do nothing? Based on current progression rates, Vethara's light dimmed further. Perhaps 10 to 15 days for the least affected. 3 to 5 days for most patients. Then we have nothing to lose by trying, Dr. Webb decided. Dr. Kim, I want you to work with Vethara on identifying the biological components of the plague progression. Dr. Rodriguez, start preparing modified versions of our broad-spectrum antivirals and cellular repair compounds. If this is a cascade failure, we need to break it at the weakest link. The next 18 hours were a blur of desperate activity. Human medical teams worked alongside the few surviving Zarathi healers, sharing knowledge across biological boundaries that had never been crossed before. The language barriers were immense. Concepts that were fundamental to Zarathi medicine had no human equivalent, while basic human medical principles seemed incomprehensible to crystalline minds. They don't think in terms of individual cells, Dr. Kim explained during a brief break. Their entire biology is based on quantum-coherent crystal matrices. To them, disease isn't something that affects individual components, it's a disruption in harmonic resonance patterns. But disease progression still follows cause and effect, Dr. Webb insisted. If we can interrupt the process at any point. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Janet Morrison, a young resident who specialized in pediatric emergency medicine, noticed that younger Zarathi patients seemed to respond differently to the modified treatments. Their crystal matrices aren't fully developed yet, she explained excitedly to the team. The quantum coherence is still forming, which makes them more vulnerable to the plague, but also more responsive to disruption of the disease process. Dr. Webb studied the data she'd compiled. The youngest patients, those whose crystalline forms were still growing, showed measurable improvement when treated with modified human cellular repair compounds delivered through cetacean quantum biological interfaces. "It's working," he whispered, hardly daring to believe it. But their success brought a terrible choice. They had enough modified compounds to treat perhaps 50 patients. Zarathi Prime still had over 3 billion infected beings. How do you choose who lives when everyone is dying? Vethara solved the dilemma in a way that perfectly demonstrated the nobility of her dying species. "Save the children," she said simply. "They carry our future. If any Zarathi are to survive this plague, it must be those who can grow beyond it." As news of the treatment's success spread through the failing communication networks, something unprecedented began to happen. Zarathi, from across the planet, began bringing their children to the human medical facility. Parents who were too sick to stand carried crystalline infants through hundreds of miles of devastated landscape. The humans worked around the clock, treating young Zarathi with a combination of human medicine and alien technology that should have been impossible. Dr. Webb hadn't slept in 36 hours when the first fully cured patient was confirmed. Little Zethira, barely old enough to have developed speech, stood before the human medical team with her crystalline form glowing brightly for the first time in weeks. Her internal light pulsed in harmonic patterns that the translation software rendered as laughter. "She says thank you," Vethara translated, her own failing light brightening slightly. "She says humans have warm lights inside them, even though we cannot see them." Dr. Webb knelt down to the young Zarathi's level, his eyes bright with tears. "Tell her she's very welcome. And tell her that her light is beautiful." As the young Zarathi danced away with renewed energy, Dr. Webb realized they had accomplished something more important than just treating a plague. They had proven that compassion could bridge any gap, that determination could overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the impossible was just another word for not yet tried. Revensive, but their work was far from over. Treating the children was just the beginning. Now they had to find a way to save the adults before time ran out entirely. Dr. Webb stood in the communications room of the Zarathi medical facility, staring at the holographic display that showed incoming ships from across the galaxy. Word of the human success in treating young Zarathi had spread through Council space faster than quantum communication protocols should have allowed. 17 different species are requesting permission to join the relief effort, reported Lieutenant Commander Park through the communication link. "The Altarian Medical Consortium is demanding immediate access to our treatment data. The Synthesis Collective wants to establish their own research stations." "Absolutely not," Dr. Webb replied firmly. "This isn't about taking credit or gathering data. Tell them they're welcome to send supplies and support personnel, but the Zarathi patients are not research subjects." Vethara, who had grown stronger over the past week thanks to modified treatments, approached with urgent news. "Dr. Webb, we have received word from the outer colonies. The plague has spread beyond Zarathi Prime. 17 colony worlds are now reporting infections." Dr. Webb felt his stomach drop. They had managed to save nearly 1,000 Zarathi children and had developed treatments that slowed the plague's progression in adults. but they were nowhere near a complete cure. If the disease was spreading to other worlds, billions more lives were at stake. "How long do we have?" he asked. "The fastest progression has been observed on Zerathi 7, where the population is mostly adults," Vethara replied. "Based on current rates, complete societal collapse will occur within 23 days. The other colonies have varying timelines, but none exceed 50 days. Dr. Kim approached with a datapad full of research notes. "Marcus, we've been working with the wrong assumption. We thought the plague was targeting Zerathi biology specifically, but the quantum analysis suggests something different." She brought up a holographic display showing the plague's molecular structure. "It's not designed to kill Zerathi. It's designed to disrupt quantum-coherent neural networks. The reason it affects Zerathi so severely is that their entire consciousness is quantum-based. But if it mutates, it could affect other quantum-dependent species," Dr. Webb finished. "The Altarians, the Synthesis Collective, even the AI cores of the Iron Coalition." The realization hit them all simultaneously. This wasn't just a plague affecting one species. It was a weapon designed to destroy any civilization that relied on quantum consciousness. Half the galaxy's advanced species used quantum neural networks to some degree. "Who would create something like this?" Vethara asked, her harmonic voice carrying overtones of horror. Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the medical facility. The main communication screen flickered to life, showing the face of Admiral Zhang from the UES Nightingale. "Dr. Webb, we've got incoming ships. Unknown configuration, but they're headed straight for Zerathi Prime. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Council reinforcements?" Dr. Webb asked, hopefully. "Negative. These ships aren't in any database." "And?" "Dr. Webb, they're broadcasting the quantum signature of the plague." The pieces clicked together in Dr. Webb's mind with horrible clarity. The plague wasn't a natural disease or an accidental outbreak. It was biological warfare, and whoever had created it was coming to finish the job. "Admiral, I want every medical ship prepared for immediate evacuation of patients. How many Zerathi can we transport?" "Maybe 2,000 in the medical ships. Another 1,000 if we pack them into cargo holds with life support," Admiral Zhang replied. "But that's less than 1% of the remaining population." Vethara stepped forward, her crystalline form pulsing with determination. "Dr. Webb, there is something we have not told you. Our quantum communication networks were not destroyed by the plague. They were shut down deliberately to prevent the spread of infection through digital channels." "What are you saying?" "We can still communicate with all Zerathi colonies instantly. We can coordinate a defense. Or..." She paused, her light flickering with what humans had learned to recognize as deep sadness. "We can ensure our knowledge survives, even if our species does not." Dr. Rodriguez had been working quietly at a computer terminal during the conversation. Now she looked up with an expression of fierce determination. "Or we can do something crazy that just might work." She brought up a new holographic display showing the modified treatment compounds they'd developed for Zerathi children. "We've been thinking too small. We've been trying to cure individuals when we should be thinking about curing the entire species simultaneously." "That's impossible," Dr. Kim protested. "We don't have enough medicine to treat billions of beings. We don't need to transport the medicine to them, Dr. Rodriguez continued excitedly. "We need to transmit it to them. The Zerathi quantum communication network doesn't just carry information, it can carry quantum coherent patterns. If we can encode our treatment as a transmissible quantum pattern, you want to send medicine through their communication system?" Dr. Webb asked incredulously. "It might work," Vethara said slowly, her light pulsing with growing excitement. "Our consciousness exists partially within the quantum network. A properly formatted medical pattern could potentially reach every Zerathi simultaneously. But the risk," Dr. Kim warned. "If we get the pattern wrong, we could kill every Zerathi in the galaxy instantly." Dr. Webb looked around at the faces of his team, human and alien alike. Outside, the unknown ships were approaching with their cargo of death and destruction. Inside, They had maybe a few hours to attempt something that had never been tried in galactic history. How long would it take to encode the treatment? He asked. With human computers alone, several weeks, Vethara replied. But if we combine human medical knowledge with Zarathi quantum processing and the support systems other species have brought, 6 hours, Dr. Kim said firmly. We can do it in 6 hours if everything goes perfectly. Dr. Webb made the decision that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Do it. Rodriguez, Kim, work with Vethara on the medical encoding. I want every other doctor focusing on treating as many patients as possible before those ships arrive. If this works, we save everyone. If it doesn't, at least we'll have saved some. The next 6 hours were the most intense of Dr. Webb's medical career. Human doctors worked alongside Zarathi healers, cetacean technical specialists, and volunteers from a dozen other species to create something that had never existed before. A medical treatment that could be transmitted as pure information. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Morrison, the young pediatric specialist, realized that the treatment patterns they'd developed for Zarathi children could be scaled up and modified for adult physiology. More importantly, she discovered that the quantum coherence patterns of successfully treated patients could be used as templates. We don't need to create the cure from scratch, she explained excitedly. We just need to transmit the quantum signature of health that we've already established in our cured patients. As the unknown ships entered the outer atmosphere of Zarathi Prime, the medical team made their final preparations. The quantum transmission array had been modified with equipment from 6 different species. Human medical knowledge had been encoded into Zarathi quantum patterns with Altairian processing algorithms and synthesis collective harmonic modulators. Incoming message from the unknown ships, Admiral Zhang reported grimly. They're identifying themselves as the Purifiers. They claim the galaxy has been contaminated by inferior biological consciousness, and that they're here to complete the cleansing. Dr. Webb felt a chill run down his spine. The plague wasn't random. It was genocide on a galactic scale, targeted at any species that didn't meet the Purifier's definition of worthy life. Are we ready? He asked the team. Vethara, now connected directly to the quantum array through crystalline interface cables, pulsed with determined light. The pattern is encoded and ready for transmission. But Dr. Webb, if this fails, the feedback could destroy what remains of our quantum network. We would lose all communication between worlds. And if we don't try, the Purifiers will finish what their plague started. Dr. Webb looked around the room one final time. Human doctors stood beside alien healers, all united in their determination to preserve life against those who would destroy it. Send it. The quantum transmission was invisible to human eyes, but the effects were immediate and unmistakable. Every piece of Zarathi technology in the facility began glowing brightly as quantum patterns raced through the communication network at faster than light speeds. The patterns carried the encoded essence of health, the quantum signature of recovery, the digital DNA of hope itself. For long moments, nothing seemed to happen. Then reports began flooding in from across Zarathi space. On Zarathi 7, plague victims who had been dying suddenly stood up with renewed strength. On the mining colonies, workers who hadn't been able to function for weeks began reporting for duty. Across 17 worlds, an entire species was healing simultaneously. The Purifier ships, arriving to find a species that should have been extinct, instead encountered a civilization that had just achieved the impossible. The Zarathi defense fleet, restored to full strength by the quantum cure, met them at the edge of the system, with reinforcements from 47 different council species. The battle that followed was short and decisive. The Purifiers, expecting to face a dying species defended only by primitive humans, instead found themselves outnumbered 100 to 1 by a united galaxy that had discovered what humans had known all along, that every life was worth fighting for. As the last Purifier ship was destroyed, Dr. Webb found himself surrounded by grateful Zarathi patients in the medical facility. Their crystalline forms pulsed with healthy light. Their harmonic voices joined in what he was told was a song of celebration and thanks. Vethara approached him, her form now brilliant with restored health. Dr. Webb, your species has accomplished something we thought impossible. You have not only saved the Zarathi, but you have shown the galaxy a new way of thinking about medicine, about cooperation, about hope itself." Dr. Webb smiled tiredly. "We just did what any decent species would do. We tried to help." "No," Vethara replied, her harmonic voice carrying overtones of deep respect. "Other species calculated risks and probabilities. They weighed costs and benefits. Only humans looked at dying beings and said, 'We cannot let this happen.' Only humans stepped forward when everyone else stepped back." 6 months later, Dr. Webb stood before the full Galactic Council as they voted to establish the first interspecies medical cooperative. The quantum transmission technique developed on Zarathi Prime was being adapted to create treatments for diseases that had plagued dozens of species for millennia. "The human species has demonstrated," High Counselor Vextar announced, "that sometimes the most advanced technology is compassion. Sometimes the most sophisticated medicine is the willingness to try when others have given up." Ambassador Sarah Chen watched from the diplomatic gallery as her species was formally recognized as leaders in galactic medical cooperation. The same species that had been considered too primitive for serious consideration was now being asked to head the Council's new Emergency Response Division. As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Webb found himself thinking about all the patients he'd treated over the years, human and alien alike. Every life saved. Every treatment that worked against the odds. Every moment when hope triumphed over despair. The Zarathi had been right about one thing. Humans did have warm lights inside them. Even if others couldn't see them, those lights were called compassion, determination, and the stubborn refusal to give up on life. And when the galaxy needed someone to step forward and save lives that everyone else had written off as lost, humanity had proven that sometimes being willing was more important than being ready. The plague that was meant to destroy civilizations had instead brought them together. The weapon designed to end quantum consciousness had led to the greatest breakthrough in galactic medicine, and the species dismissed as primitive had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be advanced. No one else would save the aliens when the time came, but humanity had stepped forward, and that made all the difference.